bars of your cage are invisible. You can't touch them. You can't see them. But they're there, constraining your every move, dictating your daily routine, even limiting what you allow yourself to imagine. And the most terrifying part, you've been trained not to notice them. Right now, you're probably thinking, what cage? I'm free. I make my own choices. But do you? Do you really? Think about yesterday. What time did you wake up? Was it when your body naturally wanted to? Or was it when your alarm told you to? What did you eat for breakfast? Something you genuinely craved? Or something quick because you had to rush to work? How many hours did you spend doing things you wouldn't do if you didn't need the money? Wait, have you ever had that strange moment when you're driving home from work and suddenly realize you don't remember the last 10 minutes of your journey? Your body was operating on autopilot while your mind was somewhere else. That's not just highway hypnosis. That's what happens when we live inside invisible cages for too long. We stop being present in our own lives. This isn't about material wealth or even physical freedom. People in mansions can be in cages too. Often the most luxurious ones are the hardest to escape. No, this is about something far more fundamental, the freedom of your mind. There's a powerful idea that the only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. But what does this really mean? And more importantly, how do you achieve that kind of freedom when everything around you, from social media algorithms to workplace expectations to cultural norms, seems designed to keep you docile, productive, and uncomplaining? Here's what's truly disturbing. The most effective prisons don't need high walls or armed guards. They just need prisoners who cannot imagine life outside their cells. Prisoners who have internalized the rules so completely that they enforce their own captivity. Prisoners who look at the open door and choose to stay put because the alternative is too terrifying to contemplate. I want you to try something right now. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing while watching this video, stop. Take 10 seconds to notice 3 things around you that you typically ignore. The texture of the surface beneath you, the ambient sounds in your environment, the sensation of air on your skin. Did you do it? Or did you just keep watching? The ability to pause, to step outside the momentum of your routine, is the first hint that mental freedom might be possible. I want you to consider a profoundly uncomfortable question. What would happen if tomorrow you decided to stop following the script that's been written for you? What if you refused to play the role you've been assigned? What would be left of your life, your identity, your sense of purpose? Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you how an ancient philosopher who was born a slave, yet achieved more inner freedom than most of us will ever know, discovered the key to breaking out of invisible cages. And I'll reveal the 3 mental shackles that are almost certainly constraining you right now, even though you've never noticed them. But first, we need to understand how we ended up in these cages to begin with, and why, despite our discomfort, we keep choosing to remain inside them. In the 1940s, as Nazi occupation spread across Europe, a French-Algerian philosopher named Albert Camus found himself confronting the most extreme form of unfreedom imaginable. The physical world around him had become a literal prison, with checkpoints, curfews, and the constant threat of violence or death for those who resisted. It was in this context that Camus developed his philosophy of absurdism, the idea that humans constantly seek meaning in a universe that offers none. But within this bleak outlook, Camus discovered something revolutionary. The ultimate form of rebellion against an absurd, unfree world is the freedom of your own mind. The only way to deal with an unfree world, he wrote, is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. Let me pause here and ask you a question that might seem strange. Have you ever felt most free during a moment of apparent constraint? Perhaps it was while traveling with just a backpack, owning almost nothing, yet feeling incredibly liberated. Or maybe during a challenging time when everything external was falling apart, yet internally you found clarity you'd never experienced before. These paradoxical moments reveal something profound about freedom that most of us miss. But I'll come back to that. This wasn't mere philosophical posturing. Camus joined the French Resistance, risking his life to fight tyranny, while simultaneously exploring this idea that true freedom exists primarily in the human mind. But what exactly does this mean for you right now, in your daily life? To understand that, we need to travel back nearly 2,000 years before Camus, to meet a man who embodied this principle in the most literal way possible. Epictetus was born into slavery in ancient Rome around 50 CE. Let that sink in for a moment. Unlike you and me, he had no legal rights, no property, and no choice about most aspects of his daily existence. His very name, Epictetus, wasn't even his birth name. It simply means acquired in Greek, highlighting his status as human property. Yet this man, born into physical bondage, would go on to become one of history's most profound teachers of freedom. The core of Epictetus's philosophy can be distilled into one powerful insight. Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. He drew a crucial distinction between things that are up to us, our judgments, our attitudes, our own intentions, and things that are not up to us, other people's actions, our reputations, wealth, and even our own bodies. I want you to try a quick exercise. Clench your fist right now as tight as you can. Really squeeze. Now, while maintaining that tension, try to write a text message or continue whatever else you were doing. Difficult, isn't it? This is what happens when we clench our minds around things we cannot control. We lose our ability to effectively manage what we can control. This is the essence of what Epictetus understood about mental freedom. True freedom, according to Epictetus, comes from recognizing this distinction and focusing your energy entirely on what is up to you, primarily your own thoughts and interpretations of events. You cannot be harmed, he taught, unless you think you are harmed. In other words, physical circumstances, even as extreme as slavery, have no power to imprison your mind unless you grant them that power. This is where Epictetus and Camus, separated by centuries, converge on a truth that has radical implications for your life today. The most dangerous prison is not external, but internal. Your true cage isn't your job, your mortgage, or social expectations. It's your belief that you cannot be free within those circumstances. But this raises an uncomfortable question that we need to confront directly. If mental freedom is available to all of us, why do so many of us feel trapped? Why do we wake up feeling like we're living someone else's life, following someone else's rules, pursuing someone else's dreams? The answer lies in understanding the three invisible shackles that modern society has placed on your mind, chains so subtle, so normalized, that most people live their entire lives without recognizing them. And unlike Epictetus's physical chains, these mental shackles are ones we unknowingly place on ourselves every single day. Shackle number 1, the ownership paradox. The first mental shackle begins with a profound confusion about what ownership actually means. We've been conditioned to believe that freedom comes from ownership, that the more we possess, the freer we become. Yet the opposite is often true. Consider this. When you purchase something expensive, a house, a luxury car, designer clothes, who actually owns what? On the surface, you own the object, but dig deeper and you'll discover an uncomfortable truth. That object now owns a part of you. Your new house demands mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and repairs. That luxury car requires expensive servicing, premium fuel, and comprehensive insurance. Those designer clothes need special care, appropriate occasions to be worn, and eventually replacement when trends change. Each possession claims a piece of your time, your energy, your mental space, and most significantly, your freedom of choice. Each item you acquire narrows your future options in subtle but powerful ways. Take a moment to do a quick mental inventory. What's the most expensive thing you've purchased in the last year? Now ask yourself, how many hours of work did it take to earn that money? Was the exchange worth it? Not just in terms of enjoyment, but in terms of the life energy you traded for it. Epictetus recognized this paradox nearly 2,000 years ago. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. By reducing his desires rather than increasing his possessions, he found freedom even within the extreme constraints of slavery. Camus echoed this sentiment when he wrote, "The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. Part of that rebellion is recognizing when your possessions have begun to possess you. But here's the truly insidious part. Unlike Epictetus, who had no choice about his lack of possessions, we actively chase ours. We voluntarily trade our freedom for objects, believing those very objects will somehow make us free. We work jobs we dislike to buy things we don't need, to impress people we don't care about. And with each transaction, the bars of our cage grow stronger. Ask yourself, how many hours of your life, hours you'll never get back, have you traded for things that now demand more of your time, attention, and resources? How many of your current obligations exist solely to maintain possessions that were supposed to make you happy? This isn't about embracing poverty or rejecting all material comforts. It's about recognizing the hidden cost of ownership and making conscious choices about what you allow into your life. It's about understanding that true wealth might actually mean wanting less rather than having more. But even if you were to break free from the ownership paradox, you'd still be constrained by the second invisible shackle, one that's even more difficult to recognize because it masquerades as virtue. Shackle number 2, the productivity trap. The second mental shackle is what I call the productivity trap, the belief that your value as a human being is directly proportional to what you produce. This belief has been embedded into the very foundation of modern society. From childhood, we're taught that our worth comes from our output, good grades, athletic achievements, artistic talents. As adults, this transforms into job titles, salary levels, and visible signs of success. The message is clear and consistent. You are what you accomplish. You matter because of what you produce. Your value is determined by your utility to others. Shocking thought experiment. Imagine tomorrow you suffered an accident that left you unable to work. How would you feel about yourself? Would your sense of worth remain intact, or would it crumble? If the latter, you're deep in the productivity trap. This mindset has created a generation of people who feel worthless whenever they're not being productive. We've internalized the logic of capitalism so completely that we now apply it to ourselves, treating our own bodies and minds as resources to be optimized, exploited, and maximized for output. We feel guilty for resting. We apologize for taking vacations. We bring work home, check emails at dinner, and respond to messages at midnight. We track our steps, monitor our sleep, and quantify our worth through metrics and benchmarks. We've become both the factory worker and the demanding boss, the resource and the exploiter. Camus would recognize this as a profound form of absurdity, humans applying industrial standards to their own humanity. Epictetus would see it as a fundamental confusion about what is truly up to us. Neither your productivity nor how others value that productivity is ultimately within your control. Consider how often you've said or thought, "I don't have time for X." What you're really saying is, "I've prioritized productivity over X." Whether X is your health, your relationships, your passions, or simply your right to exist without justification, the productivity trap forces you to earn your right to these fundamentally human needs. The most perverse aspect of this trap is how it's been repackaged as hustle culture and the grind, as if the relentless drive to produce was somehow a path to freedom, rather than a form of self-imposed slavery. We celebrate those who work themselves to exhaustion and look down on those who choose a different path. But here's what both Camus and Epictetus understood. You have inherent worth that exists completely independent of what you produce. Your value as a human being is not contingent on your utility to the market, to your employer, or even to society at large. Stop reading for a moment and check your surroundings. Notice if you're feeling slightly impatient reading this, a sense that you should be doing something rather than just absorbing information. That restlessness? That's the productivity trap at work, making you feel uneasy, even during moments of learning and reflection. Breaking this shackle requires a radical act of mental rebellion, claiming your right to exist without justification, to rest without guilt, to measure your life by how fully you live it, rather than by what you produce within it. Yet even if you manage to break free from both the ownership paradox and the productivity trap, there's still a third shackle that may be the most powerful of all, because it operates at the level of your deepest fears and insecurities. Shackle number 3, the approval addiction. The third and perhaps most constraining mental shackle is our addiction to the approval of others, our desperate need to be liked, accepted, and validated by those around us. This shackle is particularly difficult to break because it's rooted in our evolutionary biology. As social animals, our ancestors' survival quite literally depended on group acceptance. Being ostracized from the tribe often meant death. We're hardwired to seek approval because for most of human history, approval meant survival. But in the modern world, this biological imperative has been weaponized against us. Social media platforms have engineered their systems to exploit this vulnerability, turning our need for validation into an addiction more powerful than nicotine or alcohol. Every like, share, and positive comment delivers a hit of dopamine that keeps us coming back, constantly seeking the next validation fix. Let's try something uncomfortable. Think about the last photo you posted on social media. Be brutally honest with yourself. How many times did you check for likes or comments afterward? How did you feel if the engagement was lower than expected? That feeling is your approval addiction speaking. This addiction extends far beyond social media. It infiltrates every aspect of our lives, from the clothes we wear, to the careers we pursue, to the opinions we express. We become ventriloquist dummies, letting the anticipated reactions of others determine what comes out of our mouths. We live in fear of disapproval, of negative judgment, of the dreaded experience of being disliked. Epictetus addressed this directly. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. He recognized that the opinions of others are entirely outside our control, and that making them the measure of our worth is a recipe for perpetual unhappiness. Camus took this further, suggesting that true freedom requires a willingness to stand alone, to face the absurdity of existence without the comfort of universal approval. The only way to deal with an unfree world, he reminds us, is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. Consider how many of your choices, from the significant to the trivial, are influenced by the anticipated reactions of others. How many authentic impulses have you suppressed? How many true opinions have you silenced? How many genuine desires have you abandoned, all to maintain the approval of people whose opinions cannot add a single day to your life. The approval addiction is perhaps the most subtle yet powerful of all the mental shackles, because it makes us complicit in our own imprisonment. We become our own jailers, constantly monitoring and censoring ourselves to maintain the approval of others. We trade authenticity for acceptance, truth for tranquility, freedom for the false security of external validation. These three invisible shackles, the ownership paradox, the productivity trap, and the approval addiction, work together to create a cage that feels both comfortable and inescapable. They're reinforced by every advertisement you see, every social media post you scroll past, every casual interaction that reminds you of the unwritten rules you're expected to follow. But here's the truly liberating insight from both Camus and Epictetus. These shackles, no matter how strong they seem, exist primarily in your mind, and what exists in your mind can be changed by your mind. I want you to pause the video right now and look around you. Take in your surroundings, the room you're in, the device you're watching this on, the time of day, the obligations waiting for you when this video ends. Now, I want you to consider a challenging truth. None of what you just observed is your prison. Your real cage exists in the space between your ears. You feel it, don't you? That persistent sense that you're living someone else's life. That quiet voice that sometimes whispers, sometimes screams, "This isn't what you were meant for." That gnawing awareness that with each passing day, you're trading your limited time on this planet for something that doesn't truly fulfill you. I know this feeling because I've lived it. Many of us have. Perhaps you're thinking, easy for you to say, you don't know my circumstances. And you're right. I don't know the specific constraints you're facing. Maybe you have dependents who rely on you. Maybe you have debts that must be paid. Maybe you have health conditions that limit your options. Real circumstances create real constraints, and pretending otherwise would be both naive and disrespectful to your experience. Here's a perspective shift that might surprise you. Think of someone you deeply admire, someone who inspires you with their mental freedom and authenticity. Now consider this. They likely face just as many external constraints as you do, possibly more. The difference isn't in their circumstances, but in how they relate to those circumstances. But here's what both Camus and Epictetus would challenge you to consider. Within those real constraints, how much of your unfreedom is self-imposed? How many of the bars in your cage have you built yourself? Be brutally honest with yourself for a moment. How many of your possessions could you live without, and in doing so, reduce your need for income that keeps you trapped in work you dislike? How many of your beliefs about what constitutes success or a good life have you absorbed uncritically from advertising, social media, or cultural expectations? How many of your daily choices are motivated primarily by the desire for approval or the fear of judgment from others? How often do you say, "I have to," when what you really mean is, "I choose to," because I'm afraid of the alternatives? These questions aren't meant to shame you. They're meant to awaken you to the difference between your external circumstances, many of which may be genuinely constraining, and your internal responses to those circumstances, which remain always within your control. This is the core insight that allowed Epictetus to experience freedom despite being a slave, and that empowered Camus to find meaning in resistance against a world of absurdity and oppression. Their message, distilled across centuries and vastly different circumstances, converges on a single transformative truth. Mental freedom isn't the absence of external constraints. It's the refusal to let those constraints dictate your internal experience. You might be thinking, this sounds good in theory, but what does it actually look like in practice? How do I break these mental shackles in my everyday life? That's a fair question, and it deserves a concrete answer. But before I share the 3 specific practices that both ancient Stoics and modern absurdists have used to cultivate internal freedom, I need to warn you about something important. Imagine for a second that you've lived your entire life underwater, breathing through an apparatus that you believe is the only way to stay alive. Now, imagine someone telling you that you can actually breathe air, that beyond the surface is an entirely different way of existing. Wouldn't that be both thrilling and terrifying? That's what I'm about to propose to you. The path to mental freedom isn't comfortable. It will require you to question beliefs you've held your entire life. It will bring you into conflict with social expectations and the people who enforce them. It will force you to confront the ways in which you've been complicit in your own imprisonment. In other words, breaking free from your mental cage requires courage, perhaps more courage than any external act of rebellion. Because when you begin to reclaim your mental freedom, you'll have to face the most terrifying question of all. Who am I when I'm no longer defined by my possessions, my productivity, or the approval of others? This question terrifies most people so deeply that they never seriously engage with it. They glimpse the open door of their cage and turn away, preferring the discomfort of familiar constraints to the vertigo of authentic freedom. I believe you're different. The very fact that you're still watching this video suggests that something in you resonates with this message, that some part of you recognizes these invisible shackles and yearns to break free from them. But I won't pretend that what comes next is easy. The practices I'm about to share are simple in concept, but challenging in execution. They require consistent effort, unflinching honesty, and the willingness to endure discomfort in service of your freedom. Are you ready to begin this work? Are you willing to confront the ways you've imprisoned yourself? Are you prepared to experience the disorientation that comes when you start to dismantle beliefs that have structured your entire understanding of yourself and your place in the world? If your answer is yes, if you're truly committed to breaking free from the mental cage that keeps you trapped in a life that doesn't fulfill you, then let's explore the 3 practices that can transform your relationship to freedom, starting today. But I need to emphasize something crucial. What follows is not a quick fix or a life hack. It's not about optimizing your productivity or maximizing your happiness. It's about something far more fundamental, reclaiming your sovereignty over your own mind. Because until you've done that, nothing else matters. You'll remain trapped in a cage of your own making, living a life dictated by forces outside your control, dying a little more each day without even realizing it. After years of studying both Camus and Epictetus, and more importantly, after applying their teachings in my own life, I've distilled their wisdom into 3 powerful practices that can help you break free from the mental shackles we've discussed. These aren't theoretical concepts, but practical tools that you can begin implementing today. Key number 1, voluntary discomfort. Both the Stoics and the Absurdists recognized a profound truth about human psychology. We become enslaved to anything we fear, whether it's physical discomfort, social disapproval, or material loss. The things we're unwilling to experience end up controlling us. Epictetus taught his students to deliberately practice discomfort, to occasionally go without food, to wear insufficient clothing in cold weather, to abstain from pleasure, not as acts of self-denial, but as exercises in freedom. Similarly, Camus advocated embracing the full spectrum of human experience, including suffering, as part of living authentically. I want you to try something counterintuitive right now. If you're sitting comfortably, shift to a slightly uncomfortable position. Not painful, just a little uncomfortable. Notice how your mind immediately protests and wants to return to comfort. That instant reaction, that automatic aversion to discomfort, is precisely the psychological mechanism that limits your freedom every single day. The practice is simple but powerful. Regularly and intentionally expose yourself to minor discomforts that you normally avoid. Take a cold shower, skip a meal, wear clothes that don't flatter you, express an unpopular opinion, sit with boredom instead of reaching for your phone. Each of these small acts of voluntary discomfort helps break the psychological dependency that keeps you trapped. You discover that the things you fear, discomfort, judgment, boredom, don't actually have power over you unless you give it to them. As you practice voluntary discomfort, you'll notice something remarkable. The range of circumstances under which you can maintain your mental freedom begins to expand. You become less reactive, less controlled by the need for comfort and approval, more capable of choosing your response rather than being driven by reflexive aversion. Key number 2, the ownership audit. The second practice directly addresses the ownership paradox we discussed earlier. It's a systematic examination of your relationship with your possessions, not just material objects, but also roles, identities, and obligations. Let me share a personal story. Years ago, I owned a beautiful high-end camera that I rarely used but couldn't bear to part with. It represented my identity as someone who takes great photographs, even though in reality, I wasn't taking any. One day, I realized this camera, this thing I supposedly owned, was actually owning a piece of me. My self-image, my drawer space, my mental energy whenever I saw it, and felt guilty for not using it. When I finally sold it, I felt an unexpected lightness, not just from the physical absence, but from releasing an identity I was clinging to. The process is straightforward, but potentially life-changing. Make a list of everything you consider yours. Possessions, relationships, roles, responsibilities, achievements, even beliefs and values. For each item on your list, ask yourself, does this actually own me more than I own it? Does it increase or decrease my freedom? Does it serve my authentic purpose or distract from it? Based on your answers, make conscious decisions about what to keep, what to release, and what to transform. This isn't about embracing minimalism, unless that's what authentically calls to you. It's about reclaiming intentionality in your relationship with everything in your life. It's about ensuring that what you own, materially, psychologically, and socially, genuinely serves your freedom rather than diminishing it. When Epictetus said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants," he was pointing to this exact practice. By auditing your ownership, you begin to distinguish between what genuinely enriches your life and what merely complicates it. Key number 3, the daily rebellion. The final practice is what I call the daily rebellion, a deliberate, consistent commitment to small acts that affirm your mental freedom within the constraints of your circumstances. Camus wrote that the only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. But what does this look like in everyday life? Think about this. What's the one thing you do each morning, purely out of habit or obligation, that doesn't actually serve you? Maybe it's checking your phone before you've even fully awakened. Maybe it's rushing through your morning routine because you've convinced yourself you don't have time. What would happen if tomorrow you simply didn't do that thing? That's the beginning of the daily rebellion. It looks like setting aside time each day, even if it's just 5 minutes, to engage in an activity that has no productive purpose, that earns you no approval, that exists solely because it's an authentic expression of your being. It looks like saying no, without explanation, when something doesn't align with your values, even when saying yes would be easier. It looks like creating moments of silence amid the constant noise of modern life, periods where you're not consuming information, not producing content, not engaging with technology, just existing fully in your own presence. It looks like asking, in each significant decision, am I choosing this, or is it choosing me? Is this action an expression of my freedom, or a submission to external pressure? The daily rebellion isn't about grand gestures or dramatic life changes. though those may come later. It's about reclaiming your sovereignty in small, sustainable ways that gradually expand the territory of your freedom. Together, these three practices, voluntary discomfort, the ownership audit, and the daily rebellion, create a powerful framework for breaking the invisible shackles that keep you trapped in a cage of your own making. They won't eliminate the external constraints in your life, but they will transform your relationship to those constraints, allowing you to experience authentic freedom, even within genuine limitations. This is the profound legacy of both Epictetus and Camus, the recognition that true freedom exists not in the absence of constraints, but in our conscious response to them, not in having unlimited options, but in choosing consciously among the options we have, not in controlling our circumstances, but in reclaiming authority over our own minds. As Epictetus put it, make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. Or in Camus' words, the only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. If you've truly grasped what I've shared today, if you understand that the most dangerous prison is the one you've built in your own mind, then I invite you to leave a comment below with the phrase, "My mind is my freedom," so I know you've reached this point in the journey. Because what I've shared isn't just philosophical theory. It's a practical pathway to reclaiming your life from the invisible forces that have kept you trapped for too long. And while I can provide the map, only you can take the first step toward breaking free. What you do in the next 24 hours matters more than what you've learned in the last 30 minutes. Knowledge without action is just another form of mental imprisonment, a cage built of good intentions and unrealized potential. So I challenge you, choose just one of the three practices I've shared: voluntary discomfort, the ownership audit, or the daily rebellion, and commit to implementing it today, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, not when circumstances are perfect. Today. Actually, let's do something right now. Take a deep breath and feel the sensation of air filling your lungs. Now, identify one small comfort you could voluntarily give up for the next 24 hours. Maybe it's sugar in your coffee. Maybe it's background music while you work. Maybe it's complaining about something that annoys you. Choose something small but meaningful and commit to it now. This is your first act of rebellion, your first step toward mental freedom. Because freedom isn't something you achieve once and possess forever. It's a practice, a daily commitment, a conscious choice you make again and again in the face of a world designed to keep you comfortable, compliant, and caged. Epictetus, born a slave, found freedom within the most extreme external constraints imaginable. Camus, facing the absurdity of existence in a world torn apart by war, discovered that rebellion begins in the mind before it transforms reality. Their message echoes across centuries to reach you today. You already possess everything you need to begin reclaiming your freedom. Your mind, that extraordinary instrument that can both build cages and break them, is the only tool required. The path won't be easy. You'll face resistance, both from those around you who benefit from your continued captivity, and from the parts of yourself that fear authentic freedom. You'll experience discomfort, uncertainty, and the vertigo that comes from questioning beliefs you've held your entire life. But on the other side of that discomfort lies something precious beyond measure: the experience of living fully as yourself, unshackled from the invisible constraints that have kept you small, silent, and separate from your own authentic power. This is just the beginning of a journey that will transform not just how you think about freedom, but how you experience every moment of your life. In future videos, I'll be exploring each of these practices in greater depth, providing concrete examples, addressing common obstacles, and sharing stories of real people who have broken free from their mental cages. Remember that moment I asked you about earlier, That feeling you get when you realize you've been on autopilot, not fully present in your own life. I want you to notice the next time that happens. Just notice it. That awareness alone is the beginning of your liberation. If you're ready to continue this journey, if you're committed to becoming so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion, then subscribe right now. Not later, not after watching a few more videos. Right now. Because this small action is itself a declaration, a statement that you refuse to die in a cage of your own making, that you're ready to claim the freedom that has always been your birthright. The key to your cage has always been in your possession. Now, it's time to use it.